Max Verstappen won the race, dominated it, controlled it, finished nearly a minute ahead, and then, hours later, he lost everything. Not because of a crash, not because of a penalty on track, not because of another driver. Because of something so small, most fans never even think about it. For extra tires. That's it. For tires, erased a perfect victory. But here's where it gets serious. This wasn't a guess. This wasn't a protest. This was discovered through hidden data, barcode tracking, post-race analysis. The kind of system that never makes mistakes. And once they saw it, the decision was instant. Disqualified. Victory deleted. History rewritten. And what this reveals about modern racing is far more dangerous than the disqualification itself. Subscribe now, because the real story hasn't even started yet. It didn't feel like a controversial win. That's the first thing you need to understand. There was no tension at the end. No late overtake. No desperate defense. Just control. Lap after lap, the gap kept growing. Not dramatically, but consistently. And that's what made it dangerous. Because when a race looks calm on the surface, it usually means something deeper is happening underneath. Verstappen wasn't pushing beyond the limit. He didn't need to. The car was stable. The pace was clean. Every stint looked calculated. And that's where people started to miss the real story. Because in endurance racing, domination doesn't always come from aggression. Sometimes, it comes from efficiency. From managing tires. From choosing exactly when to push and when not to. And this is where a small detail starts to become very uncomfortable. Because if you go back and look at the stints, something feels slightly off. Nothing obvious. Nothing that screams cheating. But something, just a little too smooth. The kind of smooth that only happens when a driver doesn't have to compromise. And here's the question that no one was asking at the time. Why didn't they struggle with degradation? Why didn't they fall off in the later phases of each stint? Because at the Nürburgring, everyone does. It's not optional. The track is too long, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Tires don't survive easily there. And yet, their performance curve stayed almost flat. Consistent, predictable, controlled. At first, that looks like perfection. But now, knowing what we know, it starts to look different. Because having access to more tires doesn't just give you grip. It changes your entire strategy. You can push earlier, recover faster, reset performance whenever you need. You remove the biggest limitation in endurance racing. And when that limitation disappears, so does the pressure. Now here's where things connect in a way most people didn't realize. This wasn't about gaining seconds in one lap. This was about avoiding losses across the entire race. And that's far more powerful. Because while other teams were managing decline, stretching their tires, adapting their pace, Verstappen's car didn't have to play that game. It operated in a different window. A safer one. A faster one. And most importantly, a more consistent one. But here's the detail that changes everything. This advantage wasn't visible. You couldn't see it on the broadcast. You couldn't hear it in team radio. It was hidden inside the data. Inside numbers that only appear after the race is over. And by the time those numbers were checked, the celebration had already happened. The trophy had already been lifted. The story had already been written. But it wasn't the real story. Because what looked like a flawless execution was actually built on something that should not have been there. And the moment officials confirmed it, there was no debate, no interpretation, just one outcome. And what happened next is where everything truly collapses. At exactly that moment, the race changed. Not on track, not in real time, but inside a closed room, with data on a screen. The officials had everything in front of them. Tire allocations, usage logs, each individual set, tracked from start to finish. And the numbers didn't match. Not slightly, not debatably, clearly. 24 allowed, 28 used. And here's the part that most fans never see. When a rule like this is broken, there is no negotiation, no time penalty, no position drop. Because you can't undo the advantage. You can't give back tire life. You can't reverse strategic flexibility. Once it's used, it's permanent. So the only option left is removal. Complete removal. And in that room, the decision was already made before it was even announced. But what makes this even more intense is how fast everything moved after that. Because while fans were still celebrating, the officials had already written the document. Decision number 5. Final. Signed. Enforced. And when it was published, everything collapsed instantly. The winning car disappeared from the results. Not second place. Not penalized. Gone. Erased from the classification as if it was never there. And just like that, a new winner was declared. A team that didn't cross the line first suddenly inherited victory. No overtake. No fight. Just a shift in reality. Now here's where it becomes even more uncomfortable. Because the team didn't fight it. No appeal. No protest. They accepted it immediately. And that tells you something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a gray area. This was clear. Too clear to argue. Which leads to a question that changes how you see the entire situation. If they knew the data was undeniable, why did it happen in the first place? Because this is not a minor oversight. This is a controlled variable. Something monitored constantly. Lap by lap. Stint by stint. There are engineers whose only job is to track this. Systems designed to prevent exactly this scenario. And yet, it still happened. That means something broke. Not on the track. Inside the operation. And when something breaks at that level, it's never just one mistake. It's a chain. A sequence of decisions. Missed signals. Assumptions that went unchecked. And all of it led to one moment? Where a perfect race became invalid. But here's the detail that almost no one is talking about. This didn't just cost them a win. It exposed how thin the line really is between dominance and disqualification. Because from the outside, nothing looked wrong. Everything looked elite. Controlled. Professional. Precise. And yet behind that image, a single number was out of place. And that was enough. Which means something even more unsettling. How many other performances look perfect, but are one detail away from collapsing? Because if this can happen to a team at this level, then the system is not just strict. It's unforgiving. And what comes next makes that even clearer. And this is where the illusion completely breaks. Because up until now, this still feels like a technical mistake. A number exceeded. A rule enforced. A result corrected. Simple. But it's not. Because when you zoom out, this situation exposes something much bigger than a tire limit. It exposes how modern motorsport actually works. Not the version fans see on Sundays. The real version. The one controlled by invisible systems, constant monitoring, and zero tolerance for deviation. Because every team operates under the same pressure. Not just to be fast, but to be flawless. And those are not the same thing. You can be the fastest car on track, and still lose everything hours later. That's exactly what happened here. And here's where it gets even more intense. Because the Nürburgring is not just any circuit. It's chaos. Unpredictable weather. Constant traffic. Relentless corners that never seem to end. It forces teams into complex decisions. When to push. When to hold back. When to protect the tires, and when to sacrifice them. And that's where the real tension lives. Because every strategic decision is a trade-off. Push harder, you destroy the tires. Protect them, you lose time. There is no perfect balance. Unless that limitation disappears. And this is the uncomfortable implication. Because if a team operates with even slightly more flexibility, even just one extra set, they are no longer playing the same game. They are playing a version with fewer constraints. More options. More resets. More control. And in endurance racing, control is everything. But here's the part that changes how you see the entire victory. This wasn't about gaining an advantage at one specific moment. It was about removing pressure across 4 full hours. Think about that. While others were calculating risk, managing wear, adapting to degradation, one car could simply reset. Again. And again. And again. And no one noticed. Because it doesn't look like an advantage. It looks like consistency. It looks like precision. It looks like greatness. Until the data says otherwise. And that's exactly what happened. Now here's where the story becomes even more revealing. Because this situation didn't explode. There was no scandal. No public outrage. No dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet correction. A document published. A result updated. And the world moved on. But inside the paddock, this doesn't go unnoticed. Because every team understands what this means. It means the system works. It means nothing slips through. It means even the smallest deviation will be found. Sooner or later. And that creates a different kind of pressure. Not just to win, but to survive the inspection. Because the race isn't just 4 hours on track. It's everything that comes after. Every log checked. Every component verified. Every decision reviewed. And if anything doesn't align, you don't just lose time. You lose everything. Which brings us to the most important realization of this entire story. Verstappen didn't lose the race because he was slower. He lost it because the system said he never truly won it. And that changes everything. Because it forces you to rethink what victory actually means in modern motorsport. Is it crossing the line first? Or passing every check that comes after? Because in this case, those were not the same thing. And what this reveals about the future of racing is even more unsettling. Because the next part of this story is not about what happened. It's about what this allows to happen next. And this is where the story stops being about one race and starts becoming a warning. Because what happened here didn't just expose a mistake. It exposed a system that leaves no room for error. Zero. Not small errors. Not technical oversights. Not even internal miscalculations. Nothing survives. And that creates a new kind of reality for every team on the grid. Because now, it's not just about building the fastest car. It's about building the most controlled operation. The most disciplined system. The most precise execution behind the scenes. Because speed can win you the race. But only perfection lets you keep it. And here's where things get even more uncomfortable. Because this wasn't caught during the race. It wasn't visible. It didn't affect how fans experienced the event. Which means something critical. You can watch an entire race, believe you've seen the winner, and still be wrong. Completely wrong. Because the real result might not exist yet. It might still be sitting inside a database. Waiting to be verified. Waiting to be questioned. Waiting to be exposed. And that changes how you watch everything. Every overtake. Every strategy call. Every dominant performance. Because now, there's always a second layer. An invisible race happening in parallel. One that no camera shows. One that no commentator explains. But one that ultimately decides everything. And here's the part that teams understand, but rarely say out loud. The bigger your advantage looks on track, the more attention you attract off it. Dominance triggers scrutiny. Control invites inspection. And perfection gets audited. So when Verstappen crossed the line with that gap, that level of control, that almost effortless performance, it didn't just signal victory. It triggered a deeper look. Because results like that demand verification. And in this case, that verification destroyed everything. Now think about what that means going forward. Because this is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern. A system proving that it will catch everything. Eventually. And when teams know that, they don't just adjust their cars. They adjust their behavior. More conservative decisions. Stricter internal checks. Less risk even when chasing performance. Because the cost of getting it wrong is no longer a penalty.